It's okay. Hi, good morning. Thank you everybody for being here with us for our third talks of this Salone del Mobile Milano 2023. We are very proud today of being here with the Snøhetta and with the moderation of Anne-France Berthelon to speak about light, sustainability, and next perspective of design and architecture. Thank you. Enjoy.
Well, thank you, Annalisa. Thank you, Salone del Mobile, for giving us always this opportunity to have conversations and gather. And it could be informal conversation. It's always what's the best. So we will have sort of an informal conversation, which is, of course, rooted on the projects, but there are so many facets. So I think this is the best way. So I'm very proud and honored to be in conversation with I'm bad with telling your name.
Perfect.
Kjetil and Marius.
Let's say Chet.
Chet.
What do you say?
I've tried to rehearse a lot. And first, I would like to ask you, Snøhetta, I know we all have in mind one or two or three or more projects, but I think that words are always important, and I know that you have a lot of conversation in the team that we will talk a lot about the philosophy and the way you work. Where does the name Snøhetta come from first? And what does it mean?
You want a straightforward version, or do you want a sort of a deviated version?
Yeah, please.
Okay, you want them all. You want all versions. Okay. Well, first of all, in the middle of Norway, there is a huge mountain area with the name of Dovre.
Okay.
And the highest peak, mountain peak, in this area is called Snøhetta. It's a little like a pyramidal kind of thing. It looks a little like Mount Fuji.
Okay.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's like this moon landscape almost. And a lot of people believe, of course, we took the name from the mountain. Yes, in a way we did, but downtown Oslo, there is a dark beer place called the Hall of Dovre, which is the same name as the mountain area. And this is a beer place where you drink beer and port wine, like, you know, when you're more than 60 years old, you listen to the electric organ. And we established our first office above this beer place, downtown Oslo. So in a way, you have this kind of double connection. The Snøhetta above the beer place and the Snøhetta in the landscape. But maybe more importantly, it was important that neither Craig nor me nor any of the others at the beginning to put our names into this practice.
Yeah.
And that to me is essential, because that's an early choice, not to connect it to an individual's name. And by that, trying to portray collaborative methods from the very, very beginning of our existence. So that was a real conscious choice, with the landscape architecture and later expanding into many, many other different disciplines. So in my mind, the story started as a joke.
Yeah.
And it turned into something more real than we could ever expect.
So, but from the very beginning, when you founded Snøhetta, you knew it would be a collaborative process.
Yes.
And a collective one.
Yes. And
why?
Well, simply because we can talk about this when we get into the design profession also, but maybe just to emphasize the fact that the complexity of our profession is so enormous. What do you expect if you have a person's name sitting on a building?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you say, it's a Kjetil Thorsen building. No way. No way. What about the electrician? What about the workers on site? What about the engineers? What about the client? What about the whole context of huge complexities that are embedded in the things that we're dealing with on an everyday basis? The signature element of a one-person ownership to anything that we're dealing with is passé. It's over. We have to look at the conversations and the processes that we're dealing with within the complexity of the realities that we are facing. If we do not do that, we will lose as a profession.
Yeah, that's probably cinema is the only profession where you have all the names of the participants
Yes.
of the whole body of work.
Yes.
So, but then, with that multidisciplinary, no multidisciplinary, more transdisciplinary would be maybe more correct. How does it? Because you started as architecture and landscape, and now it's interior, it's design, it's even fashions, scenography, or experiences. How do you manage to have the same consistency in all these disciplines? Is it where the philosophy, the way you're working? Marius, when did you join, for instance? You trained as a designer, right?
Yes, I'm not an architect, unfortunately.
What do you mean, unfortunately? It's perfect. If you were an architect, we weren't where we are today.
Oh, I really do believe that one of the strengths that we have in Snøhetta is this celebration of individualism coming together as a whole. This way of celebrating each discipline as its own profession, and by having distinct professionals doing each different disciplines, going into the core deliveries, that's how we really can create the best possible holistic Snøhetta.
Now, I think to emphasize a little bit on that, Marius, but when we decided to go product design, we don't let only, it's not an architectural practice then, right? Then it's a product designer's practice.
Okay.
So you have to realize that by bringing, let's say, conscious-minded specialists together, you also have to give them the opportunity to actually operate within their profession. You can't, it's not just architects designing furniture, right? There's a difference there. And this difference is maintained by bringing the people in that we actually do need in order to get up to the level where we think the profession should be when it comes to the different profession. And then the collaboration.
But in the product design pieces you've achieved, are there some that have been designed by architects within the team and some by designers? And if yes, how can you see a different approach?
Yes, maybe I should answer that. Yes, there is a mix, right? And there is always a mix. But again, that's relating back to the methodology. At the beginning of a process, a creative process, people can leave their professions.
Okay.
So then we're interested in the person around the table. We're not necessarily interested only in his or her profession. So that means that you can have even collaborative conceptual thinking at an early stage, including even for interior landscape architects in the early process, because it's about the humans sitting in front of you and not necessarily the profession only. But then when it comes to performing it, then we need the high-end specialization to translate the concepts back into a possible future production line design. You know, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily use the graphic designers to do this, to draw the stairs in a building, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
but they could.
But the way they use stairs.
Yes, but we could talk with them about what is the soul of a stair.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that's.
And because now it's quite. We all know that innovation comes from cross-pollination. So is it a pioneer way of achieving innovation?
I mean, the goal itself isn't necessarily innovation, but the most important goal we always talk about is Snøhetta, and having this ability to talk with all these different types of professionals, bringing different perspectives. It allows us to maybe have a different path into different projects, a different answer to different questions, and pushing the boundary of where we believe that the field should be going.
No, I
Because
said...
innovation I find a little bit difficult, I have to say.
But I told it on purpose,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it was not like on the technical
No,
innovation. I mean, there's always an element of unexpected.
Yes, I think that's very
Meeting, that's a Columbus thing. You know, it's unexpected and you recognize it. I think we have that with some of your most iconic buildings. That is in that meaning I was using innovation.
And I think we're doing the same in product design, in a sense. What is happening is when Marius is sitting down together with a larger team and actually pushing the boundaries of the possibilities within that context where we're sitting, then he relies on the thinking of everyone. So it's more in line of a kind of critical thinking perspective rather than wanting to innovate. You know, the critical thinking puts us into position where I become his left brain and he becomes my right brain. So in a way, the collaboration moves by inspiration rather, and where you look for the inspiration rather than where you have a goal to innovate. Is that correct?
That sounds great.
But for instance, can you give us an example of, well, let's say you're presenting two new design objects here in Milan, in Salone. One has started. Let's start maybe with the uniform shelf. How did it start from the very beginning? How can we sort of zoom into that process of where the ideas come from?
I mean, it started like all projects start, and that's human connection. We started talking with Unifor in 2019, and it was a very open discussion where we were basically figuring out, is there a chemistry? Do we believe in what you're doing, and do they believe in what we're trying to achieve? That conversation became the beginning of an exploration into developing products for the future library. One of the founding stones of Snøhetta, and bringing that knowledge from our architects and interior architects, understanding better as product designers the different challenges and tasks in a library, and how can we start translating that into something that specifically Unifor can uniquely provide.
Yes, I think this is the process we could expect. But I mean, what is the specifically? How did it start? Where were the ideas that you let aside when you were brainstorming on that, for instance?
Maybe the relationship back to our first project, the library in Alexandria, ends up with a kind of frustration on what bookshelving in a library actually does.
Okay.
So then when we have these communal workshops where we invite people in relationship to something we call Idea Works. Idea Works is a book that was a study on what Snøhetta and some other companies are doing when they are at their best. So that was a long research study from a Norwegian university. And we used parts of that study in order to establish Idea Works workshops where we invite in different people. And that means, for instance, here we have the...
It will
have to
come.
interrupt you.
This is a very special project for us. It's from a collaboration with a Norwegian fashion brand called Holtzweiler, where we had the opportunity to design their catwalk in Copenhagen Fashion Week. And by working with a small studio in America that have developed sensors that translates the impulses of plants it translates that into sound and music. So the music that you heard here and that's coming there is created by the plants on location while the models are walking around. And this nature reacting to people and environment created this really, really atmospheric, strong image in that sense.
Yeah, we just love the idea that plants are singing. I mean, but back to the bookshelves, because in relationship to a workshop like Idea Works, which a lot of our projects are actually dealing with that, it brings our conversation into context, and then we adapt what we call transpositioning, where you sort of leap from one profession to the other in order to create concepts. And once these concepts are in place, then you can follow the design line further. And I think for the bookshelf, similar processes with clients on and off, trying to find out what are the core elements of a more public bookshelf, not necessarily one you would absolutely like to have at home, but for the libraries, for the public space, what kind of elements are important? For instance, what has annoyed me since the very beginning I started going into libraries is every time you bend over, you have the lamp above you, and you shade the back of the book. It's totally annoying, you know, because you bend over, the light shines here, and you have your shadow on the book back. So one criteria was, how do we get rid of, for instance, the lighting, so you can actually, and now I should have had the glasses, you know, but how can you actually read the text on the books without shading the light that is supposed to light up the backside of the books? So these type of things then evolve as ideas inside the concept. But the modularity, I think you should talk about.
Well, I mean, there's the modularity too, with a lot of shelving for libraries. The librarian actually have to call technicians to do any adjustments in the library. And so a big aim here was to have something that was so flexible and easily to operate that you can do the changes. And in a library today, we see these changes happen even more rapidly. In the same way, this system also has been developed to have a low conductivity power resource running through the whole system. So it means that you have wireless opportunities to power the lighting and maybe even more tools that come into the future. So designing this for something that we don't necessarily know yet, but something that may come tomorrow or a few years from now.
And that, of course, is part of the environmental aspects, reducing the use of material down to minimum, looking at the production methods as efficient as possible to lower the CO2 footprint of a product, for instance.
Yeah.
So how do you get to the point where you make sure that what you have produced is the optimum of energy consumption that you should actually provide into the production line of another piece of furniture?
It's like with the sound of plants. I mean, it's nature that gives you the input on how much you might light it. But that's why, of course, it will be an obvious question, and you're probably fed up with that question about light. But how much is the fact of being rooted in Scandinavia as giving you an extra sensitivity to lighting as a vital well-being element?
You know, so a few years ago, we did a book called Living the Nordic Light. To me, and it was with the Zumtobel group. It's one of the most fabulous sort of things that we've been dealing with when it comes to investigating the possibilities of Northern Light. So it was based on an interview with 100-year-old people living north of the polar circle all their life, and their response to how they perceived light. You know, you have to remember these 100-year-old people lived before electricity came to them, right? So they experienced the first type of electricity. Before that, only oil lamps, which they were carrying around. What did that mean, and how did they experience the further development of those? Really interesting interviews, pictures, photographs, 3D scans, exhibition objects, traveling around the world. The second part was to investigate more scientifically what that light might do. So with the scientists, we found out that if you've lived north of the polar circle all your life, you can see more blue tones.
Oh.
You actually observe more differentiations of blue than you do if you're born south of the polar circle. However, you're not losing your green-yellow perspective of things. So you're just adding a series of blues. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. And it's probably dealing with the fact that the sun is sitting so low at the horizon with the flat movement of the sun that we actually do have more blue hour relationships. So the eye adapts to its environment, to its surrounding. And by that, it reads simply more blue colors. And you can see that reflected in a lot of art coming from the northern regions, that the blue tones that you see in the paintings, for instance, has a much larger diversity of blues than many others. And number two, which I found very interesting, many people believe that there's something called the winter depression, because you're living in continuously dark situation. The sun never comes up, and thus it never goes down. So that develops a depression in the northern parts of Europe. No, it's not true.
Really?
It's like a myth. People are extremely happy for lingering out during the winter in order to be able to stay awake all summer. There is this belief that certain things just are the way they are because either they've been misunderstood or maybe they've been interpreted wrongly. So yes, so this was the book, and the light is of course everything we're dealing with. Light is information and light is life.
But do you mean, for instance, with that extra blue perception that you could modulate the lighting in the library system, whether if you implement it in that part of the north,
Yes.
you will change?
Yeah, it could change.
You do that already?
It could be programmed. The light sensitivity, the strength of the light, not the least, but also the background lighting.
Okay.
Together with the shelf lighting. Yes.
Yes, I know that's something that is not light, but nature, crossing nature and Nordic have been aware recently that now that not in Norway yet, but in Sweden they're growing grapes.
Yes.
And this produce very specific wine, very young, because they grow up in a 2 months span of time, with the summer lights being.
Yep. It's dry. It's a dry wine, but probably. I mean, there is actually an island on the southwest coast of Norway where we already do produce a little bit of grape wine. Before that, it was berry wines, but there is a grape wine being produced also in Norway, very small quantities. I mean, everything has a certain quality in relationship to the light and how it grows. So yes.
That was. Now also back to collaboration. You collaborate within the Snøhetta, within the team. How many people are you, by the way? I mean, on Oslo and worldwide?
Right now, we have the Oslo office, about 145 people, I guess.
Okay.
Then we have Innsbruck. The Alpine region is fantastic.
Yes.
We just love from Milano and up. That's where it starts, I mean,
looking from peak to peak.
Yeah. So Innsbruck is sitting right here, Angelo. And then we have Paris. Yeah. And I think Innsbruck has now around 30 people.
Okay.
Paris about the same. New York about 100.
Okay.
San Francisco about 8. Then we have Hong Kong, about 30 people, and we've just opened also in Shenzhen. Wow. And in Melbourne with about 10 people each. And then we have in Adelaide in Australia with also now about 30 people. So.
Okay. Nearly 1,000.
No, like
200s, we're already at 600.
No, not 200, like 30 people, 20.
Okay.
We are about 370 people.
Okay. But
thousands too much.
No. So
it's already so
170, so I was counting it.
Yeah.
But so that's already big, and you also stretched the collaboration with, as you did with Studio Plastic, for instance, last year.
Yeah.
So how does it happen? Encounters or?
I would say that collaboration comes very natural to Snøhetta, and maybe especially towards the design approach more natural maybe than a lot of other design studios, as the collaborative nature of an architectural practice is so wide. And if in terms of our collaboration with Studio Plastique, we recognized that they had found something that we saw great value in, something we wanted to use our time, our resource to really push the boundary and create visibility for and develop into the next stage, into something that could prove that waste can become value. So by teaming up and giving the best of us, them giving the best of them, and also collaborating then with Fernaccio Brioni to bring this to life, it created this very natural synergy for us.
I mean, we've set pretty ambitious sustainable goals for ourselves,
Yeah,
right?
from the
And-
very beginning.
Yes. From the beginning, it started more with social sustainability, developed into environmental sustainability, and hopefully in the next phase, life of Snøhetta, it'll also deal with economic sustainability on a society level when we're talking about economy. But this consciousness also brings us into collaborations which we don't necessarily sort of invent ourselves, but we follow certain trends that are happening which we believe have a future. It could be concrete, it could be plastic, like the S1500 chair.
Yeah.
You know, it could be many things that we're looking for at the moment where we see there are efforts going in a certain direction. Can we contribute? Can we support? Can we evolve that kind of idea and then bring it back into a design language?
Supporting is important. You think you feel you're building a community.
Yes. That's why we say, you know, in many ways, Snøhetta is our most important project.
Yeah.
Like Marius was already saying, because in the end, if you don't provide a platform for looking into the way society is operating per se, then also you have no contribution, and then you lose faith in the future. It becomes hopeless. We're here to defend the hope. We're here to defend that there is a possible future, but then we have to react.
And also, you were talking about sustainability started as a social sustainability and then, of course, environmental. Well, the name of your last chair you just launched is social. I guess it's not by chance. Is it still one of the pillars?
It's, I mean, if I can just talk a little bit about that chair,
Yeah,
because it's a special project for us. This started with this super weird Norwegian company called Varier. No one really knows the company.
Me neither.
But most have actually seen the icons that they produce. These Norwegian chairs that have kind of captured a curiosity or a Scandinavian quirkiness, if you will. Everything designed around like a very straightforward, simple Scandinavian solution to how to add ergonomics into the home. So everything for this brand was about movement. And we started working together during COVID. So we were all sitting on each of our digital meeting platforms discussing how can we create something valuable while the world was rapidly changing. Our homes were changing. How is this new reality actually fitting into our lives? And we saw that we needed even more adaptability and more movement at home. And since we come from the context of Snøhetta, maybe it was easier for us to zoom out from a single product and looking out to the product in the space, not just as one ergonomic tool, but how does this create movement in the home? How can we create more efficient and flexible living situations? Now, for around the table where suddenly you're working there during the day, the kids are playing, they're playing underneath you, they're playing behind you, you have the need for also doing focused work, but then in the end, you also want this place to actually be a very warm and nice home when you're done working. So hitting a balance there through conversations with our clients, our architects, interior architects, and pushing the boundaries for what this small company could move into, it was really exciting for us.
But on a very visually aspect, how are all these insights, how did they come together to get to that result? What did you pick up for the chair, for instance? Was it a task chair meeting a dining chair?
We had this, we basically created a long list of different types of chairs that perform different kind of functions, going from the simple stool to the highly technical office chair. And we had to sit together to kind of decide, where is that balance? How much do we need to add for it to give a lot? How much can we take away before it starts to not give enough? And together with Varier, who have been working in ergonomics for so many years, we were able to kind of pinpoint two main functions based on social movements. Basically just a social tilt, where you can sit more focused, relaxed, and the social turn, that in turn makes you or helps you become, or at least it makes it easier to be more social. And the shape itself actually started out from one of the older chairs that Varier already has, already being a very ergonomic chair.
I just love this fact that you can go back and forth and not moving the legs of a chair and turning around. We know that from office chairs already.
Yes.
That if you need to talk to your mate in the office, you don't want to necessarily turn all the legs or everything. You have to have a smoother movement. So I think also in the fine-tuning of this social aspect is that when you, which I heard described yesterday, is when you sit down in the chair, it's a stable chair right forward. But with a slight push, you move over. So it's not that you need a lot of force to get into that position, but when you lift the chair, it feels like a stable, forward-looking chair. But also this destabilization of the chair. You know, I'm personally one who always sort of gets on the back legs of a chair when I'm sitting somewhere, and people get very annoyed when I do that. But now finally I have a chair where I can do that without people getting annoyed. And you know, it's this kind of double, triple function of things. They seem small, but once you translate them, they're actually doing a big difference.
Yeah.
And
1 + 1 isn't 2.
No,
it's suddenly 10.
A lot more. It's a lot more.
Yeah.
So I love this chair from Varier, and I think in the end you will see also the size of it. The reduction is just, everything is down to the absolute millimeter of what you need. And I think that is a big challenge also in product design in the future is, you know, is it relevant? Or do we just need another chair?
No.
Or another vase?
No.
Or another whatever? No, we don't. We need something with deep relevance that can actually either replace something that you already have and keep it for a long time, or you need something that interacts differently with your life and gives you one sort of relationship to yourself one step up.
So this is social also because you're working from home. Are you working from home? Has it changed? Has the pandemic changed the way you work in the office? The meetings on the stairs are remote sometimes?
I don't know, to Olav, our managing director in Oslo, is sitting right here at the front bench. But we have like 99% of our employees back in the office, I think. It's a little harder in the States, because the travel distances are longer, so we're seeing a little bit more home office. But you know, our professions, we need to be around the table.
Yeah.
My God, I cannot sit behind a team and be creative, you know, for the rest of my life. It would kill me. And I think in the end, we really have to recognize that our professions is about being with people, seeing them in the eye, being right there, physical, being able to actually understand what these things, body language, everything. We cannot continue on Teams. But it's a good tool when everything else is cleared, you know, to check out the sort of production line. Yes, you can do that. Tick, tick, tick. Perfect, Teams. But no, creative work, no.
Same for you?
Absolutely.
Even if you're working more on a design scale and less,
Yeah, but even with social, you get to a point where you just absolutely have to meet physically, and it's so important to be able to pick up on the nuances of understanding each other, and also to recognize the potential within the collaboration.
Yeah.
For example, with social, this is a humongous investment for a company like Rivedi, and it takes so much more than just design. It's close collaboration in developing business plans and margins and numbers that justifies actually going into and making that investment. You can't do that just by showing a presentation. It's mutual trust and understanding, and how we build a collaboration and project together.
Maybe I'm jumping too fast here now, but I'm not sure we can talk about it, but I'll still mention it. You know, the Rivedi chair is getting clothing. And is that too early?
No, no.
We can talk about it. Okay,
we're just not showing too many pictures of it, but
No,
if
no,
you go to the Rivedi showroom, you can see the jacket.
You can see it there. But what I love about this idea is that you're dressing the chair in an informal way, like some sort of jacket or skirt or whatever. And you will see that this body of a chair, slowly, will have different type of costumes that it can put on.
Okay.
And in my mind, there is something in this relationship between the object and dressing it that could also vary in how you use it. You know, is it a morning chair or evening chair, for instance? Or what is the evening dress for a chair? And then we can have
a closet where you just hang it up on a dresser.
Yeah, that was the summer house syndrome, where you dressed up the sofa when you closed the summer house for winter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think there are certain elements that we have to explore, and rather try to see, again, if they're relevant in the context we're dealing with it, and then maybe being able to expand on both the language that we're using, but then the transition of the language back into design, objects, houses, landscapes, graphics.
Maybe that's why, while you were telling that, there were the images of the fashion show in Copenhagen. So that intersection, now you're adding another layer, spreading with the language of fashion and the needs, maybe, of textiles.
Yes.
So, do you develop some textiles? Have you done something with textiles?
Yes, we have.
Yes. For the sofa, which is the landscape one.
And especially for under.
Yeah.
You know, where the restaurant that goes from above the water to the water, we've developed a whole color and weaving line for the slow transition of textiles, moving in the ceiling, on the walls, for the acoustics. So
because of that gradient and
And it's I mean, the whole thing, or the whole big move, if you say, is everything dragging you or leading you downstairs. This textile was developed by writing a custom code to program the stepping of the knitting itself. So if I remember correctly, may actually be the longest textile pattern that has actually been created.
Oh, wow.
it's beautiful. If you're there, you can actually follow the color tone of the interior space from above water to underwater. So not only the reflection of the underwater light, but also the true light coming from above the water into that space. So both of them are put in relationship to the colors of the textiles.
It's sort of enhancing the physical movement you're doing
Yes.
while,
Yes.
So this is also the space, in relation with space and...
Yes. You know, we talk a lot about these things when it comes to intimacy between the human body and an object, a space, a room. So like I usually say when we're sitting here now, this bench is ours, right? Because I'm sitting on it. It's yours, Marius's bench. But when we move away, it goes back to the, this pavilion. So there's something about ownership and strong, intimate relationships between us and our environments, our physical surroundings. So we've ended up almost saying architecture is the art of prepositions. So everything is depending on where you have your body. Where's your eye?
Yeah, the point of view.
Am I in front of, behind, under, and all of these things come out of nature. Because in every language in the world, all prepositions are present. because you need to locate yourself in a certain relationship. You buy the water, you're on top of the mountain, and so forth. And that's also a communication tool for letting others know where you are, but it's also a way of finding yourself and your own location in the world. So we believe that architecture needs to talk to these language perceptions of where you are, closeness, intimacies, materials, how far you actually deep dive into these things, into future designs.
But I'm thinking of some of the projects you've done for which, forgive me if it's not the right term, but I keep naming them the Norwegian roots. That were but it's both a capsule. I mean, it allows for a point of view or multiple point of view, but it's always very open. So how is intimacy intricate in the landscape in this case?
Well, if you look at today's developments, where everything is about safety and security, access is starting to become almost like you should almost be a hard fighter for accessibility. It's like if certain groups of people are not let into a certain place, then you emphasize the division within the public that you already have at hand. So the big public elements that provide for the public of a city or a country or for the world, that matter, should be accessible. Parks should be open. Buildings should be open. You know, they should allow for this type of accessibility that does not separate people into poor and rich because of certain circumstances, but at the same time, not because you are and you're not. So the Opera House in Oslo is one of these approaches where you say, by walking on the roof for the first time, you can actually be on an opera, not only in an opera, another preposition. You actually do provide people with a very smooth threshold of overcoming maybe the fear of an elitist maybe institution like the Opera House, right? So what you do, you invite people in. You let them go on the roof. Next time they go into the lobby. And next time after that, they go into the performance hall, and they have a great experience. You know, accessibility is at the core of what we're dealing with in our cities. Not only outdoor space.
Yeah.
That has to be very clear. Outdoor and indoor.
And then if you zoom and also up, down to the furniture as well?
All the way. Public furniture, accessibility to furniture, interior spaces.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of a good example is actually now the flute collection that we have developed. It's how very small things can actually make a big change.
Okay.
And it's a development where we've designed 3 different concrete pavers to form a permeable paving system. Now, allowing for architects and landscape architects and builders to create their own water flows, ways of dealing with wastewater outdoors. It's this huge challenge that now in the later years we are starting to attack with blue-green measurements, but this is another tool in the toolkit. We can see it here where we have worked on not the form itself, but actually the distance between the stones.
Yes.
And
the non-design part is the most designed one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think it was Roel Bunchoten, a Dutch designer, which we exhibited in a gallery room in Oslo many years ago. He said, the best place for an architect to be is between nothing to the left and nothing to the right. I mean, it sounds like you can relax and release yourself completely, but you can't.
Yes, it's also respect of what will happen. You don't have the hand on everything.
No.
You can just build the pillars and let it grow.
Yeah.
Like this, yeah, yes. So maybe just one question between opening the words to the questions to the audience. What would you really like to do next, which you haven't done? I mean, in cross-pollinating with other disciplines or parts of the world, or is that something?
Maybe I should answer on behalf of Snøhetta, and then maybe I have some other elements too. But let's say our dream project, in the end, is always the one we're working on right now, or the ones we're working on right now. Because every focus, you don't ever have the time to imagine that you should be doing something else than what you're doing right now. You know, to actually get to the level of design which we are aiming for, the focus and the concentration into these projects is so absolute that the dream of seeing that what you're working on now become reality is almost like an incomprehensible fata morgana at the time when you're dealing with it. So I don't think we're the type of people who sit down and say, shit, we haven't done this, I'd really like to do that. No.
No, sometimes it's just a driver, it's what I mean.
Yeah, no, but continuing within these things that we believe, in contradiction to a lot of other people around the world, we believe architecture design does matter for society. We strongly believe that it still can drive change. We strongly believe it influences us as people, as user groups. We're not reckless with what we're doing. So our dream is probably that we should be able to do even more of that, including the environmental aspects, social aspects, economic aspects, maybe as a driver into the future. Especially economies are getting very, very stressed. We have to grab this somehow into the future and understand this better.
Thank you. So we're opening the questions now to you. If I know it's always the trickiest part. No one starts. But after, yes.
Hello. Thank you for this presentation and the ideas and the thought. I would like to highlight on an idea, two ideas you discussed earlier. The one is about accessibility should be to all in outdoor and indoor, but also on the fact that we need to work on economic sustainability. And then when we look at how economy contributed to create more borders, in fact, in reality nowadays, how do you perceive this form of economic sustainability that allow to remove these borders and create this flowiness in between indoor and outdoor between everyone?
Wow. Maybe we should try to answer your first question first, which was again, repeat it.
The first question, yeah. No.
Hello, hello. Okay. So in fact, it's interrelated. So you mentioned that the future is going to be in economic sustainability.
Yeah.
And you were mentioning the idea of accessibility to all within indoor and outdoor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are saying that today economy contributed to create these borders.
Yes.
So how do you perceive the future economic sustainability allowing architecture to allow and recreate openness and remove these borders?
Do you want me to be? Yes, I'll be absolutely honest. I don't know. Okay? But we're working on it. What is the process, rather, to get there, in my opinion? Because the results that are going to come out of this, I mean, Rome, with the Nolli plans, is a typical example. How do you analyze a city, for instance, when we talk about accessibility? So the Nolli plans of Rome, really fantastic drawings. If you haven't seen them, people, open up the Nolli drawing. They describe what is public and what is private in one. Whether it's indoor or outdoor doesn't really matter. It's a way of analyzing the cities. I think we have to start using the tools that we have in order to look at how endangered are we actually if we allow more openness in our public spaces around the world. What is the risk? Is the risk to even out some of the differences that we do believe we have? You know, if you allow people into a park and that park doesn't close at night, is the risk that you'll be mugged at night any higher if you open it to everyone, rather than just a limited amount of people, and then you have to wait for the people sneaking into the park. What I'm saying is, the risk that we're actually dealing with when it comes to not providing accessibility is that we'll have a divided population in the future. And that divided population is basically also dealing with the uneven distribution of wealth. Because once you end up in a certain direction of wealth, you're not allowed into this space. So what we have to try to do, and the work that we have to look at into the future, is how can we bridge this kind of opportunity. Maybe you can't get everyone to make the same amount of money, for sure, but at least you can open up and make it accessible, the spaces that are publicly generated, in order for them to at least feel as equal parts of a society or equal parts of the institutions that we actually do have. And I think we have a special responsibility in the Nordic region to do exactly this, because we're so soft-spoken and simple and easygoing countries, you know. With, I mean, how many people do we have in Norway now? 6 million, maybe? It's like, you know, extended Marais in Paris, you know. It's like,
that's funny. True.
It's nothing. The responsibility should be where the countries are organized, have the possibility to deal and bring examples forward.
Is it?
Hello.
Sorry.
Apologies. The clapping was for your message, not to end. So I would like for Marius to also answer the last question your moderator have. But my question is in regards to the climate crisis we're in. And I would like to ask, what is your message to the Salone, to the people that are here, to the people that are selling all this furniture? How can we help? This is a very important part of the economy. There's circularity involved, there's carbon reductions already in place. But what is your message for us, and how we can demand or design? Design matters, right?
Yes.
Design has power. Architecture matters because it's for people. People matter. What is your message for us people, for us designers, and for us that buy and sell furniture design?
Wow.
You want to go for it, Marius, or?
I can go for it, and I would say there's no simple answer. But this is something we are continuously discussing, obviously. How can we develop absolutely sustainable products, sustainable directions for product design, for products being made? We are in conversations with multiple companies in trying to learn how we may be able to take informed choices when designing. Currently, we have some tools that are allowing us to give us a little bit of insight and maybe some hypotheses of the actual footprint of a product in the end, but the data is not coming quick enough. That's something that we all need to work on, and we need to share that with each other. We need to have a circular frame of mind in terms of products. When we are in collaborations, it's one of the first things that we bring up with our collaborators. And we want to talk about not only the product itself, but how is the machinery around it working? Can we make an impact? Can we make design adjustments that allows for an even better way of delivering this today? And can we help you step into the next step? We also talk about that this is such complex materials, and there will be failure. We need to celebrate those failures too. Being able to allow ourselves to do attempts, do crazy things that we hope and intend for working, but sometimes they won't, and that should be okay too. It's how we can learn and how we can keep moving and evolving. A good example is also working with materials.
Yes.
The core materials, and this is mycelium that we have been working quite a bit with. And it suddenly opens up a new world of, or way of working. Suddenly material is not something that is produced, it's something that is grown. It's something that you have to work with a specialist that is almost more like a farmer or a chef even. And it's more about working with these specialists to put together the best possible recipe for what you're intending it to do. Currently, there are mycelium, which is, for you that don't know, this is the roots of the mushroom, and the mushroom itself is the flower. Now, this is regenerative materials, and working with this already is used somewhat in packaging. It's used in sound absorbance, but as designers, we can really help in connecting the dots, meaning that we can take this very niche specialist thing, we can connect it with markets where it actually can have an impact. And when we can connect these two things, that's how we can drive growth that actually will matter going forward. Sorry for very long answer.
But I like it. They are connected in a way, these two questions. But first of all, mycelium is the internet of nature, in a way. So it's supplying you with all the information that you can't read, you don't know. It's completely without any kind of contact and connection to how we would normally have read what a forest, for instance, does. But apart from that, as we do know the UN goals and how they are set forward, they are all dealing with specifics that we have to get to. And you can, in your own practice, you can, and at home, you can pick certain elements of the UN Sustainable Goals and say, I'm at least going to try to follow this one as a practical kind of way forward. You could say, every time you're going to buy something new, ask the question 3 times, do I really need this thing? I mean, it starts with this sort of personal consummation element in yourself. And if you need it, is it relevant? Then you look at the CO2 footprint of the furniture through EPDs maybe, or you look at how it's produced. You read up on what this kind of thing does, because, for instance, the fashion industry is not at all up to speed. We know. So how do we get there also when we talk about products and product designs in general? Then the next question is it part of an adaptable strategy, which is another UN goal, or is it actually a mitigation for something that you need into the future? And of course, the CO2 footprint. And biodiversity comes then as the big element on top. And we do know that fighting these issues for the moment is full of dilemmas. And these dilemmas, we sometimes have to look beyond them and say, okay, do you want to preserve nature, or do you need wind turbines in that nature in order to produce the number of energy kilowatt hours that you do need? So how do you balance nature versus clean energy production, for instance? Or the silicate agreements that are worldwide done by big companies in order to produce photovoltaic cells. How do you deal with these dilemmas? I think the vital choices is that if you can reuse something, reuse it. If you don't need it, don't buy it. If you can reduce your CO2 footprint at home, make sure you actually do that. In Europe, you've done that for a long time because light turns off by itself. In Norway, we keep light on all the time. This is a terrible thing. Then, how can I contribute through my profession, where I'm actually working, for us to make a change? And we've made a decision for us within our professions, where you have a building industry that is actually responsible for about 40% of worldwide CO2 emissions. We've decided to go for the powerhouses. We've decided to go for the clean energy production and investigate that. Next time you investigate materials, you cannot solve everything in one project. It gets too complex. So you go step by step. And it's urgent, but there is no way of being able, within the architectural world and the design world to go much faster than what we're doing. And with the powerhouses, number 4 now happening, I think, or number 5. Yeah, so number 5 now happening, is an energy positive building producing a lot more clean energy than it needs to maintain itself. So after calculation of about 25 to 30 years, that building ends up CO2 neutral, right? And you could, under some people's definition, actually say it's negative because it's given back more clean energy to society than it has consumed itself. I would be very careful using the terminology negative. I would say neutral, because
Which is already there.
there are things that you cannot calculate.
And maybe one thing is that you design also something for non-ownership, for sharing, for community. I mean, a library is not, it's a public library. It's,
Yeah, we even have a series.
it's not a bookshelf.
No,
it's not a bookstore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We have another series of projects which we call keyless structures. They are projects without a key.
Yeah.
And these are open to the public 24/7. You can walk in, you can stay, you can sit, you can do whatever you want to. And I think these keyless projects in a small scale define what we think and mean about accessibility. I tell you one thing, the Tvärfjällhytta, the reindeer pavilion,
Yeah.
is this wooden kind of movement inside the building. We wanted people to carve with knives on this wall. They don't, because they protect it. Once you allow people accessibility, they will protect it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Hi, nice to meet you. I come from Buenos Aires, and very nice to be here. And I want to know when you will come to work to Latin America. South American.
Yes. Actually, we're doing a small museum in Mexico, in Guadalajara. And it's under construction, and it's been under construction for the last 12 years. It's extremely slow and beautifully slow, as such. But, we would love to, but for the moment, I feel we've grown almost like too fast for the last 5 years, and now we have this kind of consolidation period, you could say. We don't want to lose ourselves.
Okay.
These studios, they need a certain degree of autonomy. The New York office would be responsible for moving into these places, but the autonomy that we're trying to build in coherence with the overall Snøhetta spirit is a slow process. So we have to juggle it carefully into place as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, we cannot stop.
Yeah, that's great. It's lovely.
Yeah, of course. When you open a book, it's like that.
Yes.
Okay. I am from India. We are a country of 1.4 billion. So, you talk a lot about economic sustainability and a lot of other things. So I just wanted to know that, are you working on a project in India? Have you thought about investigating, doing a project in India where, you're mostly doing, it's not that we are a poor country, but, we're mostly doing public architecture at a completely different economic status as, or the amount of resources we put into a building as compared to anywhere in Europe or the US. We're mostly building at about 1/5 or 1/10 of the cost. Most public buildings are built at that cost. So have you sort of investigated that part of design?
India is the biggest democracy in the world. There's no way we can avoid being in India. I've been to India maybe 7 times the last 2 years. It's something we're contemplating. Now you have your first Apple store in Mumbai. It's crazy. I don't know. I mean, when you read about all of a sudden, yes, Apple lost the sales of iPhones in China. Now we have to go to India. I don't know. If you look at it only as a marketplace, then you're losing out. We couldn't do that, right? We would have to deep dive into some of these projects that we have been involved in with some of the Indian families to look at how is the connection between the surplus that the bigger families are actually producing in providing social sustainability projects for the public. And we would sort of try to do that. We were also slightly involved in the development of some toilets in Mumbai for female workers who had no place to go to the bathroom down by the harbor. So yes, there are tiny little projects starting up. We were involved with some furniture, steel production, very, very low cost furniture production lines. But we are just at the beginning. We've been in and out of India for very much lately, but before that for many, many years. And it's definitely one of the places I fell in love with, you know, so we probably won't keep out of India for sure. We will definitely be working towards India for the years to come.
We look forward to that. Thank you
So do
so
we.
much.
So, okay. Well,
Finished?
thank
you.
Thank you.
thank you.